Hello everyone, on today's lecture, third module of Environmental Assessment and Circular Economy course within the Erasmus Plus program Renewed Employability. So today we will talk about ecological footprint and the ways how to reduce it with eco-design. So that means that we will actually talk about two things. So the first one will be ecological footprint. We will try to calculate it. We will get to know it better. And then we will talk about the eco-design as a tool, prominent tool for improving our environmental footprint. How to do it, what are the possibilities, what are different strategies, how to reduce it. Let's go on and we will see how it works. So nice hello from my side. My name is Mateusz Obrecht, and I'm the expert for environmental protection, sustainability research, and sustainable supply chain management on Faculty of Logistics, University of Maribor. Okay, so the course content is about environmental assessment and circular economy, and we are trying to connect both topics together to reach the final goal to be more employable regarding the environmental impacts. So to go first on the environmental problems, which environmental problems do exist? How do we divide them? In the past, with the human development, also huge environmental problems occurred. Since these environmental problems were only local, for example, when there was like a big coal-powered power plant, when there was an open mine, for example, this is only local or maybe regional impact on the environment. Since it was local or regional, it could be also, we could fight against it on the local scale. But recently, humankind developed so much that the new era is actually called Anthropocene, so called by the human because it is expected that humans caused so much changes to the world, to the planet, that it must have, this era must have a name on the humans. So the one that brings the biggest impact. So we divide pollution on local, regional, continental or global scale. Local, as you can see, is like smoke, polluted soil, noise, maybe fire or heavy metals. Then we have regional, which could be also air pollution, waste pollution, acid rain, and so on, excessive fertilization, for example. Then continental, we have ozone pollution, winter smoke, desertification, for example, and we have globals. So climate change, sea level rise, ozone hole, and so on. If we want to deal with the global pollution and global environmental problems, we must be able to monitor it, and we must be, of course, able to first be identified. So, how the environmental protection concept developed? With the development of more and more advanced technologies, humans were able to extract more oil, produce more in the massive production, and also created much more environmental problems. In 1960, where there was only 3 billion people living in the planet Earth, environmental problems were not so severe because the planetary boundaries were not crossed. So that means that when planet Earth had 3 billion people in 1960, all the environmental impacts caused by the human activities were actually somehow buffered by the natural capability of regeneration of our planet Earth. After that, many people started to find out that environmental impacts caused by the humans are too severe and too strong, and planet Earth cannot heal itself anymore. So that's why we started with development of environmental protection concept. Emerging awareness was the first one in 1960s, 1970s. So this was more or less a passive approach that ignored pollution, but some people started to aware that the pollution is increasing and will have severe impacts on our health, on our environment, and on our life. The first environmental protection concept that was developed was the cleaning. So this is actually the end-of-pipe approach, which focuses on recycling, on waste management, on putting some filters on the top of the chimney, for example. So we don't deal with the main reason of the pollution, but we try to minimize the pollution. So that's why end-of-pipe approach. The second approach was more like the cleaner. So we tried to prevent the pollution, we tried to make production cleaner, and this was a much more serious concept of environmental protection. The latest one is the sustainable development, which focused not just on the environment, but also in the interaction of environment, economic, and social determinant. So all three are interconnected, and people must be aware that clean environment and society well-being are strongly connected. So to go on the ecological footprint, so how ecological footprints fits into this story. Ecological footprint is actually a measure of the demand made by the person or group of people on global natural resources. It has become one of the most widely used measures of humanity's effect upon the environment and has been used to highlight both the apparent unsustainability, so of current practices, current activities, and the inequalities in resource consumption between countries and within different countries. So that means that some countries that has higher population will have completely different numbers than those countries that have lower population and a lot of land. We will talk about that a little bit later. So ecological footprint measure the demands, how much natural resources we actually need for our way of living. So here is the graphical representation. So the ecological footprint actually measures how fast we consume our resources and generate wastes compared to how fast nature, planet Earth, can absorb our waste and generate new resources. So some resources, of course, can be regenerated much faster. Some cannot be regenerated or can be regenerated during the millions of years. So the time period which we cannot say that it is sustainable. So if we talk about, for example, seafood, if we talk about timber, and so on, we can talk about renewables. So this can be regenerated in a matter of years, decades. On the other hand, if we talk about fossil fuels, if we talk about some metals, for example, this cannot be regenerated. That's why we divide the non-renewable and renewable resources. So our primary interest when calculating ecological footprint is to be able to measure how much energy we consume, how much land we need for the settlements, for the industry, for the roads, how much timber, forest we need, how much food we need, and how fast fisheries, croplands, forests, build-up land can actually regenerate. So I also wanted to ask the AI chatbot about the development of ecological footprint, and here are the results. So the ecological footprint is actually the amount of nature we use versus what Earth can regenerate. we can see that this is not really a new concept. It's actually already 35 years old. However, it has become globally recognized approximately 20 years ago. So how it all began? It all began in 1990s when William Rees begins to develop the idea. So what was the initial idea was how to measure and how to actually assess how much environmental damage do we make as a humans. Matthias Wackernagel was the student, PhD candidate of William Rees, and he is the one who developed the concept in his PhD. Already very fast, you can see 6 years after that, our ecological footprint book was published. So everything went on very fast. So it clearly shows that it was a well-identified need for some kind of a measure and some kind of an assessment tool that would enable us to show how much resources do we use. In 2003, Global Footprint Network was founded, and today this is a tool that is globally used to track sustainability and Earth Overshoot Day. So the Earth Overshoot Day is the day until we have the resources, and from the Earth Overshoot Day, we actually live on the basement of the loan from the nature. Footprint, so, is the human demand. Biocapacity is the Earth supply. And we want to balance this. However, at the moment, it is not really very good because humanity uses 1.57 Earths worth of resources per year. So of course, we don't have 1.7 Earths, we only have one planet Earth. So that means that this is a bit tricky situation that we need to start dealing with. Ecological footprint, as mentioned, shows the overshoot day. In the figure on the right-hand side, we can see how this has changed. As mentioned, in 1960, when there were 3 billion people in planet Earth was able to restore everything what we humans needed, what we took from the environment, planet Earth was able to restore it. In 1970s and 75, 80s, you can see the Earth Overshoot Day moved from the end of year till the beginning of December, then November, and so on and so on. Recently, you can see that in the year 2000, it already came backwards from the end of year to the 2/3 of the year. And at the moment, it is in July already. So Earth Overshoot Day marks the date when the humanity demand for ecological resources is a given year exceeds what Earth can regenerate in that year. So that means that from July 28, we live on the loan from the planet Earth. Of course, this cannot be done on the long term, and that's why we need some solutions. The planetary boundaries are severely crossed recently, and here you can see the countries that are within the boundaries. So like Uganda, India, Bangladesh, for example, you can see the share, how many planets we would need if all the people would live like Uganda, India, or Bangladesh. In the middle, you can see China, Costa Rica, and Nepal, for example. So all the countries that need between 1 and 2 planet Earths. So let's say close to the global average. And on the right-hand side, we can see France, United States of America, and United Arab Emirates that actually need more than 5 planet Earths. So we are quite aware that we only have one planet Earth. So this kind of living is really unsustainable and it cannot go on forever. Using the ecological footprint, when analyzing it, can show whether a country is living within the biocapacity of its own territory or whether it is an ecological debtor. This draws ecological capital in other parts of from other parts of the world. Per capita ecological footprint shows a wide difference in the demands of the nature from people in different societies. So, like mentioned before, Qatar is on the top of the list. United States actually climbed from below 5 to 7.5 planet Earths. And then we have the Rwanda at the low end with 0.55 planet Earths needed if everybody would live like people in Rwanda. In the middle, we have Germany, China. You can see the big jump in China from 1.1 till 3.6 in just a matter of years. These figures are the basis of claims such that if all of the humanity consumed like the average Americans, 7.5 Earths would be needed. Ecological footprints, of course, varies greatly between countries and not just between different countries, but also within different countries. So with more urban population living in the cities, carbon footprint is usually higher. With population living in more developed world developed part of the countries, create higher ecological footprint because they consume more goods, they have more food that is packed, and so on and so on. So the difference is quite big. If we compare ecological footprint with carbon footprint, we talked about the carbon footprint on the previous lecture, and we talked that the biggest polluters are United States of America and China. In this case, if we analyze ecological footprint, we can still see that the United States is very tricky, like the Arab Emirates, like mentioned before, but the China or maybe India or something like that doesn't have such a high impact regarding the ecological footprint. So why not? As mentioned, because these are very huge countries with huge population. So that means per capita ecological footprint is much, much lower than the ecological footprint of the whole country. Food, as mentioned, is usually the greatest influence, and the solution is clearly on the table, so more plant-based food. It is one of the biggest challenges how to make this, and also one of the biggest challenges how to convince people that eating plant-based food is not just healthier, but it is also much more environmentally friendly, so healthier for our planet. And we can see that, for example, this is like a case of one calculation, and we can see that by consumption category, food is on the first place. So the food, then the second is the shelter, then mobility, goods, and services. And this is the case of the calculation, which I will show you in a matter of minutes. So of course, ecological footprint is not perfect. It is just one of the measures how we can calculate our impact to the environment, how we can calculate how much land and biocapacity is needed for our daily activities, for one production of one product, and so on. So despite the rapid ascent, widespread use, it has faced wide range of criticism. One of them is that it is a single aggregate indicator of ecological impacts. Such aggregation requires simplification of a complex reality. So, for example, assumption built into the ecological footprint is that technology is the same across the globe and through time, which is of course not completely correct. Critics also argue that ecological footprint methodology rewards more intensive production methods that increase yields per unit of land in the short term, but might actually be less sustainable in the long run. So, for example, land degradation is one of the cases. Very similarly, organic farming method actually lowers yield. It has lower yield than conventional intensive agriculture. And therefore, it have a bigger footprint despite other ecological benefits. So, of course, ecological footprint is a measure, is actually a methodology, a way how to calculate the impacts, but of course we must be used wisely. Others argue that ecological footprint analysis is overly anthropocentric, focusing only on land and sea area that is useful to the human economy, and failing to allocate the space for the needs of other species. So this is also one of the critics. It also doesn't change biodiversity changes, for which other indicators are needed. It advocates knowledge that it cannot include all significant environmental impacts, given the lack of data for some issues and the difficulty of converting sometimes of ecological demands, for which there are no regenerative capacities. Like mentioned before, for example, the fossil fuels has a very long regenerative capacity, matter of a few thousand to a few millions of years, and those which has even longer, a longer period. Among the key impacts not reflected in the ecological footprint are those related to toxic substances, also greenhouse gases, or other than carbon dioxide and water consumption. So as mentioned already in our previous lecture on the model number 2, we can use different types or different methodologies how to measure our impact. One of them is carbon footprint, one of them is ecological footprint, one of them could be water footprint, and so on. So we can calculate them on the different waves. Some critics also object to what they perceive to be the implication of a country's population ought to live within the biocapacity of its own territory and not draw outside resources through trade. For example, small, densely populated areas may be very ecologically efficient, but will almost inevitably be ecological debtors drawing an outsized resources. On the other side, large, sparsely populated countries like Canada or Australia appear to be living very well within their territories, ecological means. However, even though their per capita footprint are 7 or above planet Earth's. Proponents of the ecological footprint have acknowledged some of the concept limitations and have worked to refine it. The first set of standards for proper calculation and communication of the ecological footprint was produced in 2006, and continual revisions are occurring. European Commission also made one in 2008, although complementary sustainability indicators and future improvements in data quality and methodology are still needed. Ecological footprint is a useful, very useful indicator for sustainable natural resource use that is easy to communicate, understand, and to see the initially, to get the imprint, what is our impact to the environment. So if we go on the latest data from 2025, and we check our country overshoot day, we can see that we are now, today it's the 1st of April, so we are somewhere over here between Austria and Russia. So all these countries already passed their overshoot day, and all of those will pass it in the future days. So here we can see those countries that could almost get through the year without the loan. However, there are very, very rare countries that still don't need to make a loan to get through the year. So we can see here which are the most problematic, like Qatar, Luxembourg, Singapore, also Mongolia, Estonia, Kuwait, Bahrain, United States, Oman, United Arab Emirates, Denmark, Canada, Belgium, Lithuania, Austria, till today already. And only 3 months has passed. So we have also the power of possibilities. So I can show you one of the cases. So the power of possibilities. So this is the Earth Overshoot Day webpage, which you can investigate even further. So it's a great webpage with very nice graphics, where you can learn more about the Earth Overshoot Day, about the methodology, how to calculate it, how to reduce it, and so on. So we have here, there is a tool, Power of Possibilities, and you can click here, how one change can impact and reduce Earth Overshoot Day. So for how many days the Earth Overshoot Day could be moved if we implement one activity. So for example, if we are talking about, for example, smart cities, you can see that smart cities, measures related with the smart cities could move Earth Overshoot Day for 29 days. Carbon pricing for 63. If we reduce work week for 11. If we improve bicycle infrastructure for 9 days. If we install onshore wind turbines for 10 days. If we promote traditional building design or eco-design for 11 days. If we talk about the green hydrogen and we try to implement the strategy for green hydrogen for 11 days. So if we go for smart cities, for example, you can see different colors. So you can see that mainly smart city measures reflect limited or reduced consumption of energy. If we talk about women's and girls' reproductive health, we can see that we focus on the population. If we talk about food waste prevention legislation, we talk about the food. So if we talk about the 15-minute cities, we talk about the cities and so on. So you have different colors, means different indicators. So if we go for the smart cities, for example, you can see what could be done with the smart cities. So the smart cities take advantage of existing technologies for building, processes, electricity distribution, smart grids, and cut dependence on energy-intensive transportation. If we would apply all these measures worldwide, we could move Earth Overshoot Day for almost 1 month. So how exactly do we do it? What's the solution? Well, smart city manages its resource metabolism carefully through more effectively integrated transport systems, more advanced energy management, particularly in buildings which consume the majority of energy for heating and cooling, and more foresight through better sensor and communication system that allow them to react more swiftly to new circumstances. Smart cities are not just more efficient, that they are also able to operate on a smaller resource budget. We can see how does it move the date. So to move the date for 29 days, and how is it scalable? All cities need to adjust the reality of increased climate extremes and reduced resource excess. Many are not yet on track, hence the potential to expand smart city concept is still untapped. So we can see the potential here as well. You can see here also the how it improves the resource security. So you can go to the energy category, for example, and you can check what could be done in the energy category and how. So the carbon footprint makes up to 60% of human ecological footprint. So decarbonizing our economies, decarbonizing our energy sector could bring the biggest benefit also in the Earth Overshoot Day. So reducing the carbon component of humanity's ecological footprint by 50% would move Earth Overshoot Day by 93 days. So more than 3 months. That would be a huge contribution. You can see also the goals related with the Sustainable Development Goals that you can focus on. So let's go on with the presentation. So the power of possibilities, you have systematically gathered different approaches, different measures, how to reduce footprint and how to move the overshoot day. So if we go on for the Slovenian ecological footprint, we can see here some data about Slovenia. I'm coming from Slovenia, so that's why I'm showing it to you. Here you can see on the graph the ecological footprint. So it is approximately between 5 and in the last 20 years, let's say, it's approximately between 5 and 6 hectares. And the biocapacity is approximately 2.3, 2.4. So we can see that there is quite a big burden behind it, and we have a deficit of approximately 3 global hectares per capita. So quite a lot, even more bigger debt than the biocapacity. We can see also what is the biggest problem. So we can see that carbon emissions are the biggest problem. So approximately 2/3 of the whole ecological footprint of Slovenia. Then we have the croplands, fishing grounds, forest products, and grazing lands, build-up lands. We can see that approximately 61.5% of Slovenian ecological footprint is actually from energy use. So our goal is to reduce the footprint by 2030, and we are actually stopping our biggest coal-powered power plant with the final goal to make huge contribution on the carbon decarbonization. There are also numerous indicators for Slovenia, for example, that could be also implemented in the category of reducing our impact, our footprint. Not directly linked with the ecological footprint, but no matter that. So one of the indicators is healthy lifestyle, healthy life years. You can see that at the moment for men it's 58.8, for women it's 57.7, and we want to go in the next 5 years, we want to come to 64.5, so above European average. We have also the risk of social exclusion. So here we are quite high. My mistake. We are not that high, so it's approximately 18%, so way below the average of the European Union. However, we want to decrease this to below 16%. We have also the GDP per capita at the moment, not yet on the average of the European Union, but by 2030 the goal is to be on the average of the European Union. And just down here we can see the share of renewable energy in gross final energy consumption, which should be increased on not just 20 but 27% or even higher to 2030. So we have different quality of life goals. So 12 quality of life goals: healthy and active life, knowledge and skill for high quality of life and work, decent life for all, culture and language as main factors of a national identity, economic stability, competitive and socially responsible entrepreneurial and research sector, inclusive labor market and high quality jobs, low carbon circular economy, so directly linked with the carbon footprint, sustainable natural resource management, so directly linked with ecological footprint, reduce natural resources and their use. Then trustworthy legal system, so how to act towards those who don't follow goal number 8 and 9. Safe and globally responsible Slovenia, and effective governance and high quality public service. So if we go on to the Slovenia, we can, oops, sorry. I can show you problems with moving this. Okay. So we can go on and we can see, for example, this is another part of the web page. So Design Our Future is actually a global footprint scenario tool to design possible futures by choosing key parameters that shape Ocean Day. It enables you to design possible futures by choosing key parameters. So how much biocapacity will be lost or gained over time, how much each of us will use, and how many of us there will be on the planet. So you can choose how quickly to change the consumption, family size make happen, and how this could impact on our future. So for example, if we have ecological footprint per person and years, for example, since till it is implemented, you can see here on the graph 1960, which I mentioned already a few times. So by the 1970s, we came to we passed the natural biocapacity. Now we are on 1.7 Earths approximately, and this is the projection. So we need to reduce it and we need to move it back downwards to reach number 1 or in the future. So if we have envisioned footprint per person per global in global hectares, for example, 2.77. So what happens if I reduce it? If we reduce it on 2 hectares, you can see how significant decrease could be. So we are here at the moment, so still increasing. If we just reduce it, let's say for 10%, approximately 10%, we can already achieve much slower growth. If we reduce it for example, 15% or 20%, we can achieve to stabilize it already. So it's not about drastic measures that would completely change our lifestyle and so on. We just need to need to decrease the footprint. So we have here also the footprint of fertility rate. So if we go back, if we go back on 2.75, and we have the average children born per woman 2.43. So if we able to, let's say, decrease this in 15 years, we decrease it on 2 persons. You can see that in 2040, we will reach the maximum, 2040-45, we will reach the maximum, and then the global humanity's ecological footprint will start to decrease. So the number of people is, of course, also one of the indicators how, because every human needs food, every human needs dresses, every human needs a place to live, and so on and so on. We are mobile So therefore, we need more people, need more resources. We have here the age of motherhood, the planet biocapacity, for example, if this planet biocapacity changes, so how it could go up and down and so on. So associated ecological depth in years by 2100, you can see that if the biocapacity is increased, so for example, with, I don't know, forestification or something like that, we can reduce the ecological depth as well. So it's a great tool, and it can really shows you how this could be easily improved. Of course, if we go on another way, so we are on 2.2, we are here. And if we say that in, for example, 10 years, we will increase our ecological footprint for, let's say, once again, we go to 20%, we can see that we will jump from 1.7 to approximately 2.3 planet Earths. So much too much, we don't have more than one. So the one is the final data. Here you can see also the map, the global map of countries in the world, and you can see with the green color the countries which are below the global debt, the light green as well. Then we have the light red, or which have overshoot day, let's say, in the second half of the year, and the red ones, the dark red, which are the most problematic. You can see from my previous pictures, which I was talking to you about the China and India, situation here has changed because of the so fast growth of the economy, that this has been significantly changed, and they are now very big contributors. So very small country in the heart of Europe, Slovenia. If we click on that, on Slovenia, we can see here once again the biocapacity per person, 2.4 global hectares. Ecological footprint per person, 5.2 global hectares, and the biocapacity, so that means what's the reserve minus the deficit, we come to the minus 2.8 global hectares. So this is actually our debt. We can see here also what was happening throughout the years. So Slovenia was established, recognized in 91. So we don't have the data for the past. We should look for different country back then. We can see what was happening with the population. So the population grew slightly. So we came from 1.99 million to 2.12 million. So approximately 120,000 people more. And we can see that the biggest problem was between the establishment of the Slovenia and 2007. After that, we can see that there was a significant decrease. Why? Because in 2008 there was like a global financial crisis, which impacted Slovenia as well. So it actually decreased. Then it went up a little bit again. So like the growth of economy also impacts the growth of ecological footprint. So you can see here what is happening. We can check maybe one other country, or go on the Slovenia, for example, and you can see it here even better. You can see what was happening, what was the initial footprint. So from 3.27 we came to 7.26, and then it was a huge decrease, and now it is relatively stable for the last 10 years. We can say around 5 global hectares. You can see here also, you can change the measures. You can see the ecological footprint versus biocapacity in global hectares. You can see it per person. You can see it by the number of Earths. So we can see that we were on 1.61. We climbed to over 4 planet Earths, and now we are back on 3.2. So one of the ways how this could be done, of course, is with reduction of carbon, with decarbonization and with the reduction of fossil fuels. Here you have also different data for build-up land, carbon, cropland, fishing grounds, and so on and so on. So we are quite lucky that, for example, Slovenia is well covered with the forests. So approximately 55% of the land is covered by the forests, and these forests are also a big sink for a big natural sink for carbon footprints. You can go maybe on some bigger country. Let's go on Italy. You can see that the biocapacity in Italy is significantly lower. So compared to, we were watching Slovenia before. So biocapacity is 2.4. In Italy, 0.9. So much lower. That's why I was explaining about the specific of Slovenia, which is a country of forests, or like a green country. And for example, Italy, which is also it preserves forests and so on, but due to the geographical location, it has smaller, lower rainfalls, lower possibilities for the forests and so on. So you can see here 0.9 minus footprint 4.2, that means 3.3 is the biocapacity deficit. So we can see it how this evolved through the years, and we can see here similarly to Slovenia, even a few years before Slovenia, the Italians reached their peak, and now the situation is improving, however, not as much as we would want it. If we go, for example, on China or India, we can see that here the situation is vice versa. So developing countries are actually increasing their impact, and India, you can see, is at the moment already above 1. Ecological footprint is above 1, and it is now being relatively stable here. For example, if we go to China, we can see the big jump till 1960s. You can see here the green is prevailing, so that means there was no ecological depth. Now, due to the rapid expansion of economy, you can see that the Chinese data are growing. Recently, situation has improved. It is not growing so fast anymore because China has made quite a lot of measures how to prevent the economy, and Europe wants to be the first climate neutral continent by 2050. China is having plan to be climate neutral by 2060. So also strong commitment towards the environmental protection, which is great. If we talk about, for example, Egypt, which has a huge population growth as well, you can see here from 0.8 to 1.8, so more than doubled their environmental footprint. So these are the data from Footprint Network. So you can choose it. You can just put it in the Google Global Footprint Network and Ecological Footprint Calculator, which we will use in a few minutes. So what I wanted to say and how to conclude with the ecological footprint, that no matter if we are dealing with circular economy, if we are dealing with bioeconomy and only biological resources, there is always some energy needed and material. There is always some production of it. There is some distribution where we need to move it. Then we need to use this these goods and so on. Then we dispose it, then we waste it, or we landfill it, or we recycle it, or something like that. So every time the part manufacturer, product manufacturer, service provider, user, waste management, and so on, in every phase there is some impact to the environment. And we must be very, we should not focus only on the use phase or only on the production, because many times there are hidden depths are lying in the raw material or manufacturing or maybe in disposal phase. And that's why I think that eco-design could be a very useful tool for minimizing it. So Slovenia, is it living within planetary boundaries? Of course not. Far from that. You can see here the representation of the donut economy. So the donut is the green part in the middle. You can see these are the planetary boundaries. So on the outer part we have ecological ceiling, so ecological boundaries. And in the inner side, we have social foundation or social boundaries. So you can see here that almost everything is Slovenia already crossed all the borders except the blue water, which are not set yet. So the land use, change, ecological footprint, material footprint, CO2 emission, phosphorus, and nitrogen. We have crossed all of them. And regarding the social foundations, we are lacking 2 of them, for example. So the donut economy is a very great representation developed by Kate Raworth, which shows us which boundaries are crossed or not. So overshoot those who we crossed, or we have a shortfall, for example, those we don't develop significantly, so like social equity, political voice, peace and justice, income and work, education, gender equality, and so on. So social foundations.
People are always talking about the carbon footprint of cars and deforestation. But what about something simple like my lunch, this delicious BLT sandwich? What path did it take to reach my plate? What footprint did it leave on the planet? Good question. Luckily, scientists have mapped out every step of this sandwich's journey. Let's start with the slices of bread. For this much bread, you just need a 10 by 10 inch square of soil, a single serving field. A tractor plows this tiny field, burning a single drop of diesel and releasing a puff of carbon dioxide, about enough CO2 to fill a pint glass. The tractor comes back, this time to plant the seeds. Another drop of fuel, another puff of CO2. It's time to add a little fertilizer, about half a tablespoon. You'd probably use a tractor to spread that fertilizer. But there's more. That fertilizer was brewed up in a factory, creating a couple gallons of CO2 in the process. Some of that fertilizer helps the wheat grow, but some of it is broken down by microbes in the soil. They belch out the equivalent of another gallon of CO2. Now, it's harvest time. Our little field has yielded 1/3 of a cup of grain. Now come a bunch of steps that require electricity that comes in part from burning fossil fuels. Time to dry it, drive it to the mill, and grind it into flour. Then on to the bakery. A little water, sugar, yeast, each with their own carbon journey. And into the oven. Our slices are put into a plastic bag that was also made in the factory, and shipped off to the store where I picked them up. Every step took a little bit of carbon that was in the form of fuel and put it into the atmosphere as CO2. You can see the biggest chunk of carbon comes from the fertilizer. But wait, that's just the bread. We could follow the leaves of lettuce from their field, the tomatoes from their nursery, all the ingredients in the mayo. Each journey puts a little more greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. But the biggest footprint comes from those 4 strips of bacon. Not only do we have to raise, process, and transport 1/1000th of a pig, we have to cultivate the plants to feed that pig. To get this one sandwich, we've released 800 grams of CO2. That's enough gas to fill 100 of these gallon jugs. Eat one of these sandwiches every day for a year, and you'd release the same amount of CO2 as you would if you drove a car from New York to Chicago. It turns out this simple sandwich isn't so simple. Of course, nothing is. You can ask Skunk Bear your science questions by following this link. Watch our last video here, and please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel.
So if we go now on the calculation of the footprint, so how to calculate your footprint, ecological footprint, well, it's very simple if you have the calculator. So the same way as we calculate the numbers, 1 + 1 = 2, we actually need to do it for the ecological footprint. So we have to be aware that each product or each activity needs some land, has some impact on the environment. So if we create food, if we create like a new t-shirt, if we produce a new car and so on, there are some impacts caused by that. So each item should be presented in terms of global hectares of land. So this is the basic idea of calculating the footprint. And here we have, for example, the calculation. So this is the footprintcalculator.org. So you can go on it. It's a global footprint network based. And you can see on the plane, you can discover your personal overshoot day with this calculation. So we will now calculate what is our ecological footprint. So how many planets do we need if everybody in planet Earth would live like us? So let's go, let's start, and let's take the first step. So we can see that, as mentioned already before, the biggest impact on our ecological footprint is the food we eat. So here we can see whether we eat animal-based products, like never or very often. So occasionally, yes or no. We can additionally improve accuracy. You can see the button below, and we can also write down how many times a week, for example, or daily, or how many times we eat, for example, different types of the products, animal products. So, for example, beef or lamb, which is the most problematic. So just for the easier representation, we can go on, let's go once or twice a week, or I don't know, this is like the average. Pork as well, poultry, we will put everything on the same number, and the cheese and eggs, for example, we will put it on the same number to go on. Then, after we finish our animal-based products, we can go on. So how much food that you eat is unprocessed, unpackaged, or locally grown? So here you can add accuracy once again. So fresh, unpackaged food, those that you buy in the market and not on the supermarket, if you go on the farmer that you grow on yourself and so on. So the fresh, unpacked food. And locally grown or produced, so within the 320 kilometers. So Slovenia, a relatively small country, that means that you can go from Italy to Hungary already. So this is still sourced as seen as a locally grown or locally produced 200 miles away. So let's put it on 30%, which is already quite high number. Then you can say which housing type best describes your home. So freestanding, no running water, of course, in Europe, maybe different standard, but this is actually the calculation that it is used for the global scale. So multi-story apartment, freestanding. So if you have a house, classical house is a freestanding house. So what is it made of? Usually we have brick and concrete, sometimes wooden ones, straw, bamboo could be for different parts of the world, but in Europe maybe mostly like this. So how many people live in there? So maybe let's say the average household is 4 people, and the size of the home. So I think it is a bit too big. So let's put it on. Let's do it on 230 square meters. So this is like the most sold family houses recently, approximately 130 square meters. Then you have the question whether you have electricity in your home or not. So we have it. Of course, the majority of the developed world has it. Also, the developing countries have it. But this application shows you not just how you can improve something, but how you can calculate it for, I don't know, what happens if you don't have the electricity, if you have the electricity and you can't get the different numbers. How energy efficient is your home? Now we have quite a high measurement regarding the energy efficiency at home. So you can see passive heating, cooling, advanced temperature control, low electricity use, and so on. If you have newer house, even better. So you can set it according to the reality. So inefficient lighting, standard appliances, then you have climate control, modern appliances is just at the average. Then you have above average, well insulated, efficient lighting, appliances, careful use, and for example, energy center design. So this is like new buildings, like passive houses or active houses, which produce more energy than they spend. So let's go on the something above average. And what percentage of your home electricity comes from renewable sources? This is a tricky question. So if you have a photovoltaic on your roof, so you create all the electricity that you spend on your roof, then you can put it on 100%. Otherwise, in the majority of the cases, you can find this data on the bill for the electricity. Usually on the bill of the electricity, especially in Slovenia, that's how it is, you have the electricity mix presented. So you can see what's the carbon footprint and what is the share of renewables, and sometimes you can go on paying extra fee, so maybe €1 or something like that, to have completely renewable energy. So if you do that, you can make a huge contribution. So let's say in Slovenia we have approximately let's say one third of electricity is from renewables, plus minus a few percent. It depends from the hydrology of the rivers. Then you have, compared to your neighbors, how much trash do you generate? Much less, much more. So if they put one bin outside, do you put 2 bins, or you just don't create any waste at all? So you can again click to add the accuracy. So usually plastic and paper, how much do you recycle or separately collect? Maybe better word, household appliances, I don't know, I don't do this usually. Books, magazines, newspapers, I do buy this. How much you recycle, what comes closest to your annual new household furnishing. So new bedding, new table, or you just completely refurbish living room or something like that. So it depends for whether it's a lot, not much, average. So I will keep it as it is. And what comes closest to your monthly new clothing, footwear, and sporting goods purchases. So average, like shirts, underwear, socks, not much, with sometimes underwears or something like that. Or if you like fast fashion, buy a lot of clothes, then several new outfits and shoes every month. So you choose it for yourself, click the save button, and you can go on traveling. So the mobility. So you can see that the calculation is a bit similar to the one that we were having for the carbon footprint. However, it has the different representation, and you will see the results at the end. So how far do you travel by car or motorcycle each week? So I don't have the motorcycle, so I don't use it. With the car, usually approximately like 200, let's say 250 to 300 kilometers or something like that. You can put also the consumption of your car. So for example, my car consumption is like 6 liters per 100 kilometers. So for the motorcycle, you don't need to move because it is, we put it on the zero beforehand. Then how much you travel by car, how often do you carpool. So usually this is really not many times that we use carpooling. How far do you travel on public transportation each week? Here again, you can add details to improve accuracy. So by train, I use a train quite a lot. So usually I do approximately like 300 to 30 kilometers by train. Bus, I rarely use bus, so I won't put it on. Then we have how many hours you fly each year. So that depends whether you're a traveler, a business traveler, or like a tourist that want to see different places. So if we go on one flight from Europe to, I don't know, United States, so this is approximately let's say 20 hours flying there and back. So just one of the ways how to do it. And here are the results. So you can see, yeah, okay, this site wants to know about our donations as well. So the personal overshoot day, as you can see, the 2nd of April, so it's going to be tomorrow. So from tomorrow on, we don't have, let's say, if I express in the monetary terms, from tomorrow on, we don't have any money. We need to borrow the money. Otherwise, we will not survive. And this is what we do with the planet Earth. We only have one planet Earth, so we cannot borrow additional one. And you can see that if everybody would live like the data that I have put it in, we would need 4 planets Earths. So quite a lot, right? So we can go on the details, and we can see the details. Here we have the consumption category. We can see that, for example, in this case, food was not that tricky. The mobility was the biggest one. Because I put the flying. So the flying is the trickiest part. And you can see the ecological footprint is 6.5 global hectares. So similar, more than the average in Europe, similar to United States. So quite a lot. You can see also the carbon footprint, CO2 emissions per ton, and percentage of your total ecological footprint in the carbon footprint. So you can see 63%, quite a lot. You can see it here as well with the different representation. So carbon footprint is the most challenging one that we need to work on. So here you have the how you feel. You can retake the quiz and you can change different parameters. For example, you can go on for the trick. You can explore the solutions. So you can see here what are the potential solutions. For example, the city. 70 to 80% of the world's population expected to live in cities by 2050. So smart cities, smart urban planning, managing resources can do much. Renewable energy, for example, direct path to reducing ecological footprint, addressing climate change. Can you take the transit, bicycle or walk instead, driving yourself once a month or once a week? Then we have the population. Addressing population size is essential to create sustainable future for all within our population, planet's ecological budget. So family planning is actually one of the cases how to do it as well. Food, diet, and cutting food waste are powerful sustainability levers. Can you be a smarter shopper, reduce food waste? Can you try like a new plant-based recipe or a meal once a week, and so on and so on. So protecting, regenerating the natural ecosystems that are essential for living will make balance on planet Earth. So you can also add additional solutions. You can see different videos and solutions here as well. So it's a great tool, and you can get a lot of information. So today's task it is for you to calculate your own ecological footprint, and of course not just to calculate it, but to try to minimize it too.
You probably already noticed that every time you go to the supermarket and check your food's labels, they don't usually come from somewhere nearby. In fact, sometimes they come from very far away. Bananas from Central America, berries from South America, fish from China, even meat from very distant New Zealand. But how bad is it for the environment? Should we just eat local? Hold on, things are not that simple. Let's look into it. The United States has never imported so much food. The numbers are staggering. From 1999 to 2017, the total passed from $43 billion to $137 billion. The amount of imported fruits in the markets has increased more than 3 times in the same period. And the number of vegetables also saw growth of more than threefold. The US imported most of the food from Mexico, followed by Canada, France, Italy, and China. All of this food traveling around the world poses some questions. Does it make sense to buy food that came from so far away? In an era of global warming and climate change, why do we need to eat a piece of meat from an animal raised on the other side of the world? These concerns became a theory, and the term food miles was coined in the 1990s by Tim Lane, a City University of London professor. The term is used to present the distance that the food is transported from the place it's produced until it reaches the consumer, and can also be used to measure the carbon footprint of a product. Basically speaking, the longer the product travels, more energy is needed, and therefore the worse it is for the environment. A big movement of buy local, eat local was created in response to this. Environment activists started to believe that food from distant countries was probably worth avoiding, and the locally produced fruits, meat and vegetables from the nearby farmers market was probably a better choice. But things are not as simple as they seem. Food miles alone does not show exactly how bad a carbon footprint of a product is. It is certainly one of the indicators, but taking it alone can lead to a false sense of green responsibility. A better way of calculating the environmental impact of a product is called life cycle assessment and takes into consideration more than just how far away it was transported. It considers the production process, the way it is stored, the international distribution, the way it is processed, packaged, how it is locally distributed, how it's kept in the supermarket, and how it is dealt with by the consumer. As we can see here in this graph, food miles are just a fraction of the actual impact of the product on the environment. The life cycle assessment method takes into account details like the kind of fertilizers it is used for production, what kind of packaging, and the way the product is disposed of and recycling possibilities. But although more complex than just looking into food miles, the method is also not perfect and might still leave out some important aspects of food production of the calculation, like the social impact. In summary, it's very complicated to precisely say what the carbon footprint of our food is. So much so that even companies that tried to calculate and label all products have had a hard time doing so. A famous case is from British supermarket chain Tesco, one of the biggest in the world. In 2007, they announced the plan of labeling the carbon footprint of all the 70,000 products they had in stores. 5 years later, they called off the plan, blaming the amount of work in the process, the difficulties involved, and other supermarket chains that were not doing the same. Figuring out carbon footprint is hard because we must look into the details. If we look at food miles, for example, there are many nuances. The way the food is transported is very important. Cargo ships are the most efficient, followed by trains, then trucks, and lastly planes. A container transported on a ship emits 0.14 kilograms of CO2 per ton kilometer, while this number is 6.8 by plane. But if we look at how food is transported around the world nowadays, only 0.16% are transported by planes and 58.97% are transported by ships. Scientists of Lincoln University discovered that a piece of lamb meat produced and sold in the UK can have a higher carbon footprint than if produced in New Zealand and transported to the UK by ship. They analyzed in both countries the water use, harvesting techniques, fertilizer outlays, renewable energy applications, means of transportation, and the kind of fuel used, the amount of carbon dioxide absorbed during photosynthesis, disposal of packaging, storage procedures, and dozens of other cultivation inputs. Through their calculations, a lamb raised on New Zealand clover-choked pasture and shipped 11,000 miles by ship to Britain produced 1,520 pounds of carbon dioxide emissions per ton. At the same time, if this same lamb was produced in Britain using the feed, it would produce 6,280 pounds of carbon dioxide per ton. In summary, buying British lamb from the local market would be more damaging to the environment than buying from New Zealand. However, there are also examples of studies that point in the other direction. That's the case with German apples. In general, countries that produce apples can sell fresh ones year-round without importing. This is thanks to a technology called controlled atmosphere. The apples are usually harvested in the autumn, with the second semester in the northern hemisphere, and are stored in rooms with controlled temperature, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and humidity levels. This way, the stored apples do not fully develop, but let's say, they go to sleep. This allows apples to stay fresh for longer after harvest than if they were simply refrigerated. That's how you can buy local apples the whole year. But does this increase the apple's carbon footprint? Is it still better to buy local? 2 German scientists tried to answer this question. They compared German stored apples' energy use to fresh apples imported from New Zealand. Different from the lamb meat from the UK, the German apples had a better result. Taking into consideration all the emissions from cultivation to consumer shopping, the local apple stored in a controlled atmosphere required 5.893 megajoules per kilo, while the imported apples from New Zealand required 7,499 megajoules per kilo. But again, it's not that simple. The 2 scientists calculated the impact of keeping the apples for 5 months. In the apple industry, it's not rare for the fruit to stay in these stored rooms for more than that. If it stays 9 months, for example, importing from New Zealand might be a better solution. And it also depends on what kind of energy is used in the process. In summary, food miles can be indicators of an environmental impact, but alone are not usually enough to point out the actual damage. The best way is to look at the whole food supply chain. But there are ways of making informed decisions when it comes to what food and from where you should buy. Let's look into some important actions you can start taking to minimize the carbon footprint of your food. If you are going to worry about food miles, make sure that you avoid what is transported by air. This includes perishable products such as asparagus, green beans, strawberries, and other berries. Just as an example, Let's take a look at the difference in CO2 emissions between green beans that are found in Dutch supermarkets. The ones coming from Kenya by plane emit much more CO2 than the ones grown locally or from Morocco, which arrived in the country by sea. So, regardless of what you buy, just make sure it arrived at your city by land or sea, never by air. The best way to avoid berries traveling around the world by plane is not eating them all year round. Purchasing in-season produce can help you reduce the carbon footprint of your food. This way it's very much likely that you are not only going to avoid the products coming from far away, but you will also avoid the local ones that are cultivated in heated greenhouses or stored in cold storage. The amount of energy used in in-season products is usually lower and can result in products with a lower carbon footprint. Don't forget, the way you consume also impacts the carbon footprint of your food. If you are buying a couple of oranges and placing them in a plastic bag, the carbon footprint is already much higher than if you took them home in your tote bag. Make sure you avoid packaging when not necessary, and remember, any petrochemical-derived packaging along the way just increases the carbon footprint of your food. It is always important to check where your food comes from. As we saw in this video, distance alone is not the only information that matters when it comes to carbon footprint, but it can be very important. And if the package does not have the information about how the product got to you, knowing where it comes from can help you understand the journey that the food took to get to your table. There is plenty of information available online, and it is usually possible to find out how the journey might have impacted the environment. Do your research. You don't need to be a radical vegan to make a difference, but reducing the consumption of foods with a high carbon footprint can already be helpful. The total emissions from global livestock are 7.1 gigatons of CO2 per year. This is 14.5% of all greenhouse gas emissions by human activities. Cattle are the animal species responsible for about 65% of the livestock sector's emissions. Reducing the amount of beef consumption would already be a step in the right direction if your idea is to reduce the carbon footprint of your diet. In the end, knowing what you eat and where it comes from can make a huge difference. Be aware, pay attention, research, and make sure that what you eat is in line with the world you want to live in. So that's it for this video. How important are food miles? We hope you like to know more about the food journey from production to your plate. Since you made it to the end, click around and keep watching. And don't forget to like our video and subscribe to our channel.
So the first part is done. We can go on the how can we reduce our footprint with eco-design. So with the eco-design, what exactly is eco-design? So eco-design is a tool for minimization of environmental impacts. It's an approach to design a product with special consideration for the environmental impacts in its whole life cycle. So like mentioned before, there are some impacts that are created in the production. There are some impacts that are created in the material sourcing. There are impacts that are created, for example, within the use phase. We have something within the end of life. So after we use it, we throw it away. We don't think about it anymore. But there are still some impacts that are being emitted to the environment. So it's actually the upgrade or secondary part of the life cycle assessment, and it is of course complex and time consuming. So it is based on the three core factors. So the four core factors are sustainable development, cleaner production, so meaning that we have to work on prevention than just curing, so not the end of pipe approach, but prevention, and life cycle thinking, life cycle approach. So we consider all the life cycle stages. There are different motivators for eco-design. We have internal, we have external motivators. We have, for example, internal are the manager's sense for environment or company's sense for the environment. Increasing product quality, differentiation is a very strong one. decreasing costs, for example, energy costs, waste costs, water costs, penalties, and so on. Sometimes need for innovativeness, improved company's image, and improved motivation of employees. This is especially visible for the generation Z, because the new generation that starts to work, that entering the employee market at the moment, this generation has very strong focus toward protecting the environment. It is tricky that they also have the highest footprint, but they want to live in a better environment as well. Then we have the external one. So the market requirements, so the green customers, social environment, public opinion sometimes, or consumer tests, which could be a very promising tool how to move from classical to more environmentally friendly products. Then we have competition, trade organization. Sometimes suppliers want us to give them more information about the sustainability of the products. Environmental awards or labels can also motivate us to go towards the eco-design. Legislation, norms, and standards also forces us to make a step towards sustainability. Take-back schemes, like for the batteries, for example, are a very strong tool. So in the past, if we go on the batteries, how the producers did produce the batteries. So classic batteries, every producer was interested to make huge profit, so they produced batteries with the lowest possible costs. However, they sold the batteries and then they didn't take care what's going to happen with the batteries after the end of life. So there were some different approaches what could be done, and one of the approaches is to make, rechargeable batteries, so you can reuse it many times. Another possibility is to make them easy to disassemble at the end of life. So if there is a take-back scheme, and that means that you are responsible for taking them back. So you, as a producer, you will start thinking at the beginning of the development of the battery also, what are you going to do with it at the end of life when you will take it back? So you will not produce the cheapest battery just from the production perspective, but the cheapest one from the life cycle perspective. So this is a huge difference. Transparency increase, and of course, so subsidies. If going towards the creating eco-design strategy, we need to first analyze what are we doing, what are we producing, what we want to achieve, and what do we need to do. So first of all, we need to analyze environmental product of our product or service. So this can be done with the carbon footprint, this could be done with the ecological footprint, and we can see what are the impacts that we are causing, where are the hotspots, what can we do. Then we can analyze internal and external drivers. So why are we even motivated to do that? Is it because of the legislation? So does legislation forces us? Or are there some maybe bottom-up, top-down motivators, just like focusing on the new generation, want to make more sustainable products to attract Generation Z employees? Or is it because we are a part of the corporate sustainable reporting directive, or why are we doing that? Then we define and create potential improvements, study the feasibility, and we, of course, have to define the priorities. Otherwise, usually companies, organizations has limited resources, financial, human, time, energy, and so on. So usually we need to define the priorities. So that's why we are looking for the top priorities. And this could be done by calculating, ecological footprint, changing different parameters, and see where we can achieve the biggest difference, and we can focus on that measure, for example. So the stages of eco-design thinking, it is not just the eco-design, it is the eco-design thinking. So globalization has modified the productive activities, enhancing the level of rivalry among companies. And this rivalry generates immediate reaction in order to respond successfully to the new situation. So we have different stages. You can see 4 stages here. So first one, stage number 1 is viewing compliance as opportunity. So central challenge it is to ensure that compliance with norms becomes an opportunity for innovation. Competencies needed here are the ability to anticipate and shape regulations, skills to work with other companies, including rivals, not just those who we don't work against, and there is also opportunity to innovate. The second stage is to make value chains more sustainable. Central challenge here is to increase efficiency through the value chain, to work on expertise in techniques such as carbon management, life cycle assessment, redesign operations to use less energy and water, and the capability to ensure that suppliers and retailers make their operations more eco-friendly. So it's not just our company anymore, it is about the value chain. So the contribution is even wider. Then we can go on the stage 3, designing sustainable products and services. So here the central challenge is to develop sustainable offering of redesign existing ones to become eco-friendly. So the skills most friendly, which are the most friendly or unfriendly to the environment, generate real public support for sustainable offering, not just greenwashing. So real improvements, and the management know how to scale suppliers of green materials and the manufacturers to produce it. This is, for example, developing compact and eco-friendly packaging, for example. And then we have the stage 4, developing completely new business model. So this one is the most challenging, but it also brings the biggest benefit. So the central challenge is to find novel ways of delivering and capturing value, which will change the basis of competition. So the capacity to understand what consumers want and figure out different ways to meet those demands. The ability to understand how partners can enhance the value of offerings. So for example, delivering new technology that change value chain relationship in significant ways. Devising business models that combine digital and physical infrastructure. So like a case, I can give a case of this parcel lockers. So you have different lockers. If you want to, for example, let me show it to you on the maybe on the internet. So we have these parcel lockers. You can see it here. So this is the Slovenian one. You can use GLS, maybe the more well known. So for example, so locker, put it on the English. So you can see the parcel locker, and for example, if you want to order something online, you order new T-shirt, for example. This new T-shirt have to be packed and delivered to you, to your home. So one of the ways how delivery companies can do it is they call you, they send you SMS, a message, or I don't know, some kind of a confirmation. They deliver it to your home. This is of course quite expensive, because the last mile logistics is the most expensive. So if they would have the chance to deliver everything on, let's say, one place and don't have to deliver it to every address in one village or one town, for example, that would be much more environmentally efficient. So that's why these parcel lockers were actually developed, because they are reducing the need for last mile logistics, and on the other hand, it actually increases customer satisfaction. So how does it increase it? Because beforehand, delivery guy had to call you, you had to be at home. So if you were not at home, you just took the dog for a walk, and delivery guy was, I don't know, maybe was late for 5-10 minutes. Delivery guy came to your address, to your doors, knocked the doors or ring the bell, and no one was at home. So they called you and you said, yes, I'm just walking back. I will be there for 10 minutes. So they don't have time to wait for you. So you just get you just need to find alternative time window. If you didn't do that, you had to go to pick up your package on the post office. So the tricky part on the post office was that because it was always quite a query line. You had to wait for 5 minutes, 10 minutes for the package to be found and ready and so on. The tricky part was also because the post offices usually don't work during the night. So if you want your package at 8 p.m., you cannot get it till the next morning when the post office was open. So the parcel lockers are actually the way how this challenge could be tackled. So the delivery companies actually deliver everything on one spot, and you just get the information and the code, where to pick it, how to pick it, when you can pick it, and you can pick it up 24/7 whenever you want to, whenever you pass through the I don't know, there are many times are in front of the shopping centers, many times there are in front of gas stations and so on. So maybe on some spots with big fluctuations where you can easily pick your package. So this is one of the ways how you can improve, for example, to combine digital and physical infrastructure. There is also eco-design legislation. So we have Eco-Design Directive 2009/125 ES. So this is European legislation, which is well developed already, and it also enables applications of eco-design in the practice. So why eco-design is so important? So we talked at the beginning of the lecture that end-of-pipe approach actually only tries to reduce the environmental impact at the end. With eco-design, we want to prevent it before it is committed or incurred. So here you have the case, for example, building life cycle. So if we want to build a new house, the new house will last for 100 years or 200 years or whatever. So very, very long period of time. So everything what we do with that house is set already in the design, in the project. Architects do this kind of architects actually set what are the emissions that are going to be emitted through the whole life cycle of the house. So you can see here in the operation and maintenance phase, the most are incurred, but the potential opportunity to reduce it, it's very, very low. So you can see it where we are. The opportunity to reduce the life cycle impact is the highest in the site selection and building design. So site selection, meaning that we don't build houses in the swamp, we don't build houses where we need, I don't know, different construction to to make the land even to make the appropriate land for constructing the house and so on. So the site selection, building design, and here you can see the third one is the construction. So already in the construction phase, we have the opportunity to reduce life cycle impact by up to 25%. So only 1/4. All the rest already before that. So that's why designing the product which is environmentally friendly is so important, because you need to consider environmental impacts already before starting to build or produce it. There are different strategies. So eco-design is having a very strong tool which is called Eco-Design Strategy Wheel. This is related, could be related to products, could be related to service. It is in both cases related with the life cycle. So you can see here the strategies. We have here the low impact materials, for example. You can start with low impact materials. You can reduce materials, for example. If we have a plastic bottle, so if I explain it on the case of the plastic bottle. So we can use different types of plastic. So we can use environmentally more friendly plastic instead of the classic one. So that means we selected strategy number 1, low impact materials. We can reduce the materials. We can create plastic bottles out of 7 grams of plastic instead of 9 grams. So we will make significant reduction of material. We can optimize the production. We can use renewable energy in the production. So the production will be cleaner. We can optimize the distribution. We can have bottles shaped in the like squares, so that when we will pack it and we will distribute it, we won't have any empty spaces. So we will optimize the distribution phase. We can optimize the user stage, optimize initial lifetime. So if we put some, for example, if we put on the bottled water some special text on it or some special figure, maybe this person will reuse the bottle once more before throwing it away. And of course, we have to optimize the end of life system. So, for example, bottled water, there is bottle of the water, then we have a cap which is not made of the recycled material, for example, so it's different material than the bottle. Then we have the packaging, which is again with different material. So we have to be very careful how will we be able to disassemble this product, and of course how to recycle it. The last and the most important strategy is, you can see it at the top. It is new concept development. So it is number 0. So that means, why do we have to bother with plastic bottle at all? We don't need plastic bottle. We need water. Our human, let's say human demand is to have drinking water. If we are thirsty, we need something to drink, but we don't need the plastic bottle. The plastic bottle is quite a new product. So it is with us for the last 30 years approximately. Before that, we didn't know plastic bottle. Everybody was making fun with from the companies that started to sell plastic bottled water, and everybody was saying, here, why would I buy plastic bottled water if I can drink tap water? Majority of the European Union, big parts of the world, you can still use and drink tap water. Of course, the situation went out of the borders. Now quite a lot of plastic bottled water is sold, and the new concept going towards maybe glass bottles, going towards banning plastic bottled, avoiding plastic bottles and so on, is the new concept development. So not dealing with separate measures, but completely new model. So you can see here the strategic eco-design strategy wheel. You can see here, for example, different ways of how to do it. So, for example, we talked before about the low impact materials. So avoid materials that damage human health. Use minimal materials, use renewable resources, use waste byproducts, thoroughly tested materials, reuse materials. Then we have optimized manufacturing, designed for ease of production or quality control, minimize wastes, minimize energy, minimize number of production methods, minimize number of components because it's easier to maintain. Reduce products and packaging weight for efficient distribution. Use efficient transport system. Use local production and assembly instead of instead of doing it on different parts of the world. So local production and assembly, let's say one of the very hot topics at the moment in the trade wars and customs. It is also very good from the perspective of eco-design. Then we need low impact use, minimizing emissions, reducing energy inefficiencies, reduce water use inefficiencies, material use inefficiencies, and so on. Then we have optimized product lifetime. So we need to build in users' desire to care for product. So if we get special, I don't know, special watch from our wife, our girlfriend, then we will take care of those watch much better. If we get a new watch for, I don't know, finishing the diploma, then we will take care of that watch much better because it will have a special meaning. If we just bought it because of the, I don't know, fast fashion has forced us and convinced us that we really needed to survive, if we don't buy this watch along with 10 others that we have at home, then we will not be able to survive. So I'm making fun, but this is how the global economy works. So we need to build in users' desire to care for product because in that case, we won't throw it away. We won't forget about it. We won't buy another one. We will use that one. And that means we will improve our environmental footprint and there will be no need to produce additional one. Take back programs, for example, like bottles, mineral water and take back schemes to take bottles back. Build in durability. Now we have, for example, the new legislation in European Union that actually enables or gives us the right that the products need to last. So we need to be able to maintain them and the products has to last. So many of us bought like a t-shirt or something, we washed it for 5 times and it bleached. So now we will have minimal standards how to do it and it will not be able to produce low quality products anymore. Creating timeless look for fashion. For example, some retro models are much more sustainable because they are not replaced so fast. For example, if we look for the car manufacturers, we have Volkswagen Beetle, we have Mini Cooper, for example. So some kind of a timeless look that remains the same for many, many years, not being redesigned every 2 years or every 1.5 years. Then we have optimized end of life. So integrate methods for product collection, provide ease of disassembly, provide for recycling or downcycling, design reuse, provide for use of components or ability to biodegrade, provide safe disposal places and so on. And the most important one, as mentioned before, the rethink, the innovation. So rethink how to provide the benefit with associated product, not necessarily with your own. Anticipate technological change, building flexibility, provide product as a service. So this is what is going to happen probably also in the mobility. So the big car manufacturers will not sell cars as products anymore, but it will be like some kind of a what we pay for the smartphones. So we don't buy the smartphone, we rent it. Actually, we pay monthly fee and we can use it. So product as a service is much more sustainable. Then we have, for example, how to start with eco-design. We have eco-design questionnaires. These are the questionnaires that help companies, organizations, individuals to start thinking what should be done. So it could be done with the implementation of life cycle assessment, the very time-consuming, cash-consuming investigation. And because this is quite expensive, in one of our projects in the past, we actually promoted eco-design questionnaires to increase awareness and to show people, to show companies what can be done with basically very simple measures. We just need to identify the impact at the beginning, at first. So how to start with the eco-design implementation? Here we see the questionnaire. I will divide it in different phases. So design for material sourcing, design for manufacture, design for transport and distribution, design for use, and design for end of life. Here is the first one. So design for material sourcing. We prepared these questionnaires and we distributed and we sent it to the companies. We went there for the consultations and we asked them very simply, do you reduce weight and volume of your product? So if it's already implemented, you can say yes. Could be implemented, you can say, could it be, or is it not possible, or if it's from some reasons, technical reasons, or legislative reasons not applicable. Increase use of recycled materials to replace virgin materials. So, as mentioned before, plastic bottles can be done from recycled plastic, can be produced from bioplastic, but the cap on the top is not allowed to be recycled. So, for example, here we could say not applicable because of the legislation. So why we have such legislation, I'm not sure, because it doesn't promote the circular economy. Then the third one, we have increase of renewable sustainable materials like Forest Stewardship Council for wooden or paper products, increase incorporation of used components, reduce the use of scarce material, which copper is also among them recently. Eliminate hazardous substances. There is a list of hazardous substances, so companies can check them and maybe just replace hazardous substances with some less hazardous, or replace scarce material with some less scarce material. So this is also the way how to create better product, how to create less impact to the environment. And so on and so on. So we have here, for example, the case of Donar chairs. So this is the Slovenian producer of chairs with special care of sustainability. So you can see the chair. So the backbone is actually made of metal, and the seating part is made of recycled plastic. So the basic idea is that this is actually the response to the human need to reduce our carbon footprint on the planet and to rediscover waste as an industrial material of the future. So rethinking as a new philosophy of socially responsible and sustainable design. So this is the chair. So we have different types of chairs with all of them focused on more or less sustainable design, but this one being the the flagship of sustainability. So you can see that you can, if you don't like the chair anymore, you don't need to throw it away. You don't need to buy a new chair. You can just, I don't know, say I will just change this sitting part. So backbone, I will keep the backbone. I will just took different design, different color of the sitting part. So you don't need to replace the whole product, just a few components of them. So that's why it is also related with the sustainability. If we go strategies in the design for manufacture, you can see reduce energy consumption, reduce water consumption, reduce process waste, use recovered or recycled material from process waste within our company, reduce emissions to air, water, soil, and reduce number of parts. So this is something that is very clearly done in car manufacturing. For example, car manufacturing is a very, very strong user of recycled plastic. So in our cars, you can rarely see some plastic which is completely it's of new origin, but it is usually recycled plastic. They also want to reduce process waste. So you maybe heard of zero waste concept, which was founded and implemented in Japan manufacturers first. Reduce water consumption, reduce energy consumption, and so on, especially because of high energy prices. So this is what has been very well seen in the car manufacturing sector. Then we have design for transport and distribution. So we can minimize product size and weight because it will be easier to distribute. We can optimize shape and volume for maximum packaging density. So like I mentioned before with the plastic bottles, they could be round, or they can be circular, round, or circular, or they could be designed to fit in the box. So here I have the case of IKEA. So the IKEA has the design, special design demands. So maybe you remember the famous IKEA table. So this famous IKEA table was actually that's it. It was usually it should be in white color was the most popular, I think, but doesn't matter. So this is the classical IKEA setting table, and this table was actually developed with the idea of how to easily pack it. So you have 4 legs, you have this part up here, and it needed to be packed very easily. So this is the case how IKEA designers didn't get the job to create nice table, or they didn't get the job how to make table that will be sold very good. But their initial idea was, because IKEA was dealing also with the logistics, to create a table that will be easily packed, easily disassembled, assembled, and so on. And that's why it was such a hit at the end. Okay, here we are. Then we have the design improvements in the design for use. So how to reduce energy in the use phase. So we can see this, for example, with also with the legislation about European legislation on standby energy consumption, for example, for the TV screens and so on, for new stricter regulations on new buildings. So new buildings need to have need to be more or less passive houses. Reduce water in use, quantity and nature of consumables, maximize product lifetime by designing ease of maintenance, and so on and so on. So different cases different possibilities. And the design for end of life. So like mentioned, maximize ease of reuse, disassembling, recycling, reduce energy used for disassembling and recycling, reduce water used in disassembling and recycling, and the cases are the batteries, the take-back scheme, so the extended producer's reliability, like mentioned already before. So producers producing the batteries need to consider also the end of life approach, because they are responsible what's going to happen with the batteries at the end of life. So we can bring them back to the store where they are selling the batteries, and we can leave them there free of charge. They have to take care of this, not us. So if we go on cascading the priority measures, we can see that there are different ways what we can do. We have to consider that we are dealing many times just with recycling, but recycling is only one of the ways how to do it. You can see here that if we landfill wastes, this is far from being good or optimal. We can at least incinerate it and get some energy from the wastes. If it's possible, it's much better to recycle it. But recycling usually doesn't mean actual recycling. If we recycle plastic bottles, we get lower quality of the plastics. So it is actually not recycling, but it is downcycling. We can use it for some lower quality products. So that's why some kind of upcycling techniques or something are much better. Reusing and preventing from waste from the generation, this is the best way how to do it. So this is the ladder of materials, cascading priority measures for different materials, organic or non-organic materials, and the way how we can do it. The eco-design strategy will, as mentioned before, we already also made some eco-design in small and medium-sized enterprises in Slovenia. We have paper published current and potential eco-design integration in small and medium enterprises for construction and related industries, which is available online. And we wanted to find out first from the companies how environmentally aware they are regarding their material use, regarding their energy use, water use, waste creation, pollution, and social impacts. We investigated how it works and so on. Then we defined current and potential state. So where we have the biggest gap, which are the best strategies, and we wanted to find out which are the best strategies that companies see for the future. So here you have, for example, from our research representation, for example, with red color are current measures, so what companies are doing currently, and green are potential measures or something that they expect to be more realistic in the next 5 years. So we can see that they are focusing at the moment in increasing recycled materials, increasing the use of renewables, reduce weight and volume. In the future, they will focus on eliminating hazardous substances, use materials with lower embodied energy. So energy is becoming more important. Design for manufacture as well. Reduce process waste, recovered materials. These are the first two. And in the future, reduced energy consumption will be the first one. You can see the big gap between first and the second. So reducing emissions and energy consumption, the most important. If we go for the transport and distribution, we can see that they are now dealing with optimized transportation, optimized shape and volume, and in the future, recycled materials and optimized transportation to decrease fuel and emissions. So once again, energy issue. Design for use, you can see maximizing product lifetime, lifetime and by designing ease of maintenance, and in the future, design for use, reducing energy in use is prevailing again. Then we have maximizing product life cycle, optimize quantity and nature of consumables, eliminate potentially hazardous substances, reduce emissions, and reduce water in use, for example. And design of end of life, we have now maximize ease of reuse, reduce amount of residual waste generated, and in the future, reduce energy used in disassembling and recycling. So we can see for all 5 stages, companies are showing us that energy issues will become much more important. So once again, we came to the conclusion that energy issues are now the most important part of our environmental or ecological footprint, and they will become even more important in the future. So companies, organizations, and individuals will have to deal with energy issues, with decarbonization of energy issues, and of course, in this way, we can contribute to decreasing our ecological footprint. So eco-design actually enables systematic minimization of ecological footprint by reducing impact of material sourcing, production, distribution, use, and end of life. So the whole value chain or the whole supply chain.
Namaste friends. In the last video, we understood the concept of carrying capacity. Let's go ahead in this essential concepts of sustainability series and understand ecological footprint, its significance and origin. What is ecological footprint? We know the impression left by a foot or shoe on the ground or a surface. That's the footprint. Only issue is what additional meaning the term ecological is adding to it. Ecological footprint analysis measures the aggregate land area required for a given population to exist in a sustainable manner. The idea was conceived in 1990s by Mathis Wackernagle and William Rees at the University of British Columbia. The ecological footprint launched the broader footprint movement, which is nowadays widely used in sustainability studies. The ecological footprint is a measure of the demand human activities put on the biosphere. More precisely, it measures the amount of biological productive land and water area required to produce all the resources an individual population or activity consumes, and to absorb the waste they generate, given existing technology and resource management practices. Activities can be as simple as eating, breathing, traveling, to complex as mining, incineration, and toxic chemicals usage. What is unit of ecological footprint? Footprint is measured in hectares, denoted by small ha. As we can imagine, our actual footprint, means area covered with our foot while standing, has to be measured in square centimeter or square meters, as it's an area. In the same manner, we measure ecological footprint in square meters, and the unit preferably used is hectares. How big is 1 hectare? The word hectare is made up of hect and air. Hect means 100. It's from the same root our 100 is derived. And air means 100 square meter area, means 10 by 10 meters. So hectare means 10,000 square meters. You can imagine a cropland of 100 by 100 meters dimension. And how big is it? 1 hectare generally on an average can occupy a space of 1.25 football fields. It equals to 2.47 acres of land, and there are 100 hectares in 1 square kilometer. Ecological footprint is calculated in hectares, and we call it as global hectares, GHA. Why do we need ecological footprint? In most of our approaches, we often only talk about depletion of non-renewables, such as fossil fuel and minerals. But there is one more essential thing to consider. This is not only an extraction issue but deposition issue as well. Our use of fossil fuel must have as a compensatory sink the acres of land required to sequester the carbon from our combustion of fossil fuels and other wastages. Means, in simple terms, we are harming the environment in two ways. First, by extraction of more resources beyond limits, and second, by depositing more waste than the Earth's capacity to handle it. How much global hectares are we consuming? What do you think? The global average is 2.75 global hectares per person. Though this number of 2.75 global hectares per person does not seem daunting, it is a lot more serious thing to worry, because this 2.75 global hectares is an average for world population. If we consider the gap in developed and developing countries, it will show that people in developed countries are using a lot more resources compared to poor nations. Let's see how. These are the top 10 countries having highest ecological footprint. One person in Qatar is using as much as 14.5 global hectares resources. And compare this with Mozambique, Rwanda or Malawi, in which one person consumes only a quarter of hectare. Global hectares or hectares would be difficult to understand and comprehend in a glance. How much earth we are consuming, right? So, for easy comprehension, Global Footprint Network has done wonderful work to convert it into earth equivalents. How much earth would be required to meet the global needs of humans of today's time? What do you think? According to latest updated data of 2016 from Global Footprint Network, we required 1.69 Earths to fulfill our requirements. In the 1970s, we crossed the limits of our Earth and continuously demanding more than its capacity. We have this serious issue right in the future to face. Please do check resources from Global Footprint Network and other resources given at the end of video. And finally, thank you so much for your valuable time. Please like, share and subscribe and hit bell icon to get notified of our next video. Thank you.
So if we go back to this figure, country overshoot days in 2025, we have to keep in mind we have only one planet. So for today, I want you to calculate your own carbon, your own ecological footprint, and find at least 5 measures how you can minimize it. With those 5 measures, calculate for how many days you can move your overshoot day so that we can see what's the real improvement and how successful we could be. Thank you, and we see each other again on the next lecture, which will be focused on the circular economy and life cycle assessment.